There's something about Mkhwanazi's presentation, his disposition, his desperation even when he relates the steps that he took to get to this moment that gives him a level of credibility.
I think he has a gravitas that we are sorely lacking in most of our public figures. And I think that, you're right, that's what people are responding to. It doesn't hurt that he's also quite handsome, if you don't mind me saying.
Too short for me.
He has this kind of aura that does command respect and confidence. You're also totally right that one of the reasons for his popularity is that he's a populist. It is well known that if you are a criminal, you do not want to be caught in KZN because there won't be a trial. You're just going to get shot by a cop and no one's going to ask very many questions, and that's how Mkhwanazi's police force runs. And as you say, people love that because we are so sick of crime. It is the one uniting factor probably that covers all races and cultures and income groups.
This episode was brought to you by 91.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Readiness Report with the Daily Maverick. I'm Redi Tlhabi. As you can see, I'm sitting in my chair. I'm not at Guantanamo Bay. I'm not at an ICE detention center or whatever the hell you have been reading. Focus, focus. In the week when all of that was going on, the South African team that is negotiating a trade deal was in Washington. That's the more important stuff. And even as I speak to you, it is a big week on the diplomatic calendar with the United Nations General Assembly getting underway. High-level week starting today, the 80th session of the UN General Assembly. And many people are describing it as one of the most consequential UNGAs. Why? Because of Palestine. There's lots of protest on the street. More first world. I'm actually quite reluctant to use that term, given the fascism, yes, I said that word, the suppression of protest from Germany to the United States. I wonder whether that first world label, I know that it refers to other pillars of development, but there is something quite ominous happening in the air. Anyway, more nations are recognizing the state of Palestine. Yesterday, it was the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia. I heard the name Portugal also doing the round. So let's just focus to what really matters in this global space. Okay, look, I have not been very constructive in engaging with the inquiry that is currently underway, the Madlanga-led commission. I did pay attention to the testimony of KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. But back in July, when he was dropping his bombshells, I could not watch. I actually shed tears because I think often we think that our relationship with our government or the state is just a political level. It is also a personal level because we have a vested interest in our country. Yes, I'm working in Washington, but I am a South African with a vested interest in the trajectory of our country. Let me tell you how I felt in July while Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi was telling us, making allegations, really damning allegations against the highest echelons of law enforcement leadership and political power. I just felt near man. Sure, not this nonsense again. We have been here before. We have barely recovered from the Zondo Commission itself. We see the people whose names were recommended for prosecution just arrogantly going about their business as if nothing has happened. Meanwhile, the soul of our nation was battered, both on the political front, business front, you name it. It was a huge moment and we've just moved along. I know there are some cases that are going through the process, but it's not nearly commensurate. The level of action and accountability is not commensurate with the extent of the damage, if you ask me. But let me tell you why else I've been struggling in the last week to just really bring my heart and pay attention to what is happening with the commission. Maybe it's self-preservation, because it's not so long ago that we had a police commissioner in 2010, Jackie Selebi, Glenn Agliotti, convicted of serious crime. The police commissioner, the national police commissioner. We've had a hearing into General, they call him Bheki Cele, and of course he challenged that report and he won, but there were other things that were going on that questioned his probity and suitability. What else did we have, guys? Benny Nkemeza, the former head of the Hawks, an inquiry by Judge Motejwane saying that he was dishonest and unfit for office. Have you forgotten the NPA leadership? Was it Lawrence Mkhwebi and Nongcobo Jiba? Also found to have lied to the court and withheld important documents. And about Jiba herself, didn't the former president intervene to grant a pardon to her husband who was doing time in jail for theft, corruption. So former President Jacob Zuma just gave him a clean slate and pardoned him. Do you remember that? And then we've had these moments over and over again. Oh, how can I forget Richard Mdluli? He looks and smells like a criminal. The crime intelligence head, intimidation, extortion, you name it, convicted. These are not just allegations. And with Mdluli in particular, remember that slush fund? It was the crime intelligence resources for crime intelligence that he had looted those funds. And not only that, he'd appointed his family and friends into crime intelligence, something that is so important to the security of our state. So for me, I'm unable to be episodic about this particular commission. It's all those connected events that make me feel, why are we gifting these politicians with our outrage? Why are we gifting these law enforcement leaders with our outrage as if we have not been outraged before? Yes, I know that we need to focus on each matter for its merits, but they're all connected because they speak to a weak state led by the African National Congress. And my feeling as a citizen of South Africa is that the government, the state, just doesn't care about our well-being. Okay, I'm done. I just thought, let me bring somebody who can be a little bit more constructive to this conversation because I'm hurtful. I am so sick of all of them. Rebecca Davis from the Daily Maverick. Hello.
Hi, Redi. I'm so glad that you haven't been deported to Eswatini yet.
You know what, Rebecca? If they're going to deport me, please take me to Botswana. Have you seen how hot their president is? Brian and the kids can go to Eswatini. I'm going to Botswana. That man is hot. Okay, so we have a commission and we need to engage with it with all seriousness. The National Police Commissioner, Masamula, is testifying this week. What's your take thus far?
I'm confused, Redi. And I think it would probably be good if we would all just admit that this is incredibly confusing. And I understand, the public looks to journalists to make sense of it, but sometimes we also have to hold up our hands and say, hold on, we're also not sure what's going on here. And I say that being very cognizant, as you will be too, of our long and inglorious history of fame intelligence reports, in spy schemes used to undercut political opponents. This is something in South Africa. It's, a vestige of the apartheid days as well. And it's something that's followed us into the new dispensation. So when you have a very murky story involving lots of claims with very little evidence, it really is incumbent on us all to just take it slowly, hear it out, and not jump to any conclusions. So the reason it's confusing is because in simple terms, here you have Police Minister Senzo Mchunu. He's on Cyril Ramaphosa's slate going into Nasrec in 2017. He's one of Ramaphosa's chief campaigners in KZN. And his reputation, really, you can agree or disagree, is basically as a good guy. He's never had a corruption allegation. He's a former teacher. He's sort of seen as, if the New Dawn was to in any way produce the reforms we all hoped it would seem like Senzo Mchunu was really one of the ideal people to lead that transformation. He is now being accused of essentially colluding with hitmen, right? Of aiding and abetting a criminal syndicate and of deliberately shutting down the task team that was looking into them in order to protect his criminal overlords. That is one hell of a claim about a sitting police minister, right? And while I have no trouble in believing that there are many shadowy elements to police, to crime intelligence, etc., we're going to need to see a lot of evidence. And so far in this commission, we have seen almost no evidence. In particular, we've seen no smoking gun to connect Mchunu to the allegations. So we have seen WhatsApps, for instance, between this mysterious Mafeking businessman, Brown Mokotsi. That's fine, but none of that speaks to the police minister's direct involvement. It does seem clear from what General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has been testifying that there are criminals who receive favors from the South African Police Service. And I don't think any of us would be shocked to hear that. And it may be the case that, as he's alleged, these favors are sometimes quite shocking. Policemen registering luxury vehicles in the name of the municipality, rather than to the criminal they belong to. All of that obviously definitely needs to be investigated and rooted out. But we cannot ignore the possible implications of this politically in terms of the fact, for instance, that Senzo Mkhwanazi at one stage was considered to be potentially in the running for the ANC presidency after Cyril Ramaphosa. There are many people, I'm sure, who would love him not to be there. We don't know that much about Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's political affiliations, but we do know that the MK party really likes him a lot. And maybe that's just because, he's their KZN dude. But there are questions to be asked about motives of everyone involved here.
Change is daunting, challenging, disorientating, unstoppable. Change is inevitable. Change is wise. Change is action. It's liberating, rewarding. Change is brave. Change is opportunity. We're always ready to invest in it. 91. Investing for a world of change.
I saw some of the commentary online with South Africans seeming to gravitate more towards Mkhwanazi because of how he's acquitted himself. South Africans are so sick and tired of crime. So when criminals are killed, nobody pauses to say, did the police act legally? Was this police brutality or out of the bounds of what's legally required? The criminals are dead and therefore we're happy. So he becomes popular in that way. The confidence as well, I like him. The confidence with which he speaks, the commitment to being a police officer when he can do something else. I saw some criticism of the media that often when there are commission of inquiries and these corruption allegations are made against certain politicians, we run with it as the media. And the accusation was that why is it that Mkhwanazi's accusations, that's what they are now, and allegations are just treated with such skepticism. It didn't help that the NPA head also came in and rightly said, she's right, whether we like it or not, she's right, to say what's coming out of the commission right now are still allegations and we're not at a point of evidence. And that's what a commission is meant to unearth, whether or not there's a case to be made. So neither the judge who's leading this commission, nor the NPA head, nor the accusers in the form of Mkhwanazi can conclude what the status quo is. But there's something about Mkhwanazi's presentation, his disposition, his desperation, even when he relates the steps that he took to get to this moment, that gives him a level of credibility.
I think he has a gravitas that we are sorely lacking in most of our public figures. And I think that, you're right, that's what people are responding to. It doesn't hurt that he's also quite handsome, if you don't mind me saying. But he has this...
Too short for me.
He has this kind of aura that does command respect and confidence. Having said that, you're also totally right that one of the reasons for his popularity is that he's a populist. That it is well known that if you are a criminal, you do not want to be caught in KZN because there won't be a trial. You're just going to get shot by a cop and no one's going to ask very many questions. And that's how Mkhwanazi's police force runs, and it's an open secret. And as you say, people love that actually, because we are so sick of crime. It is the one uniting factor probably that covers all cultures and income groups. So I wrote recently that I think that Mkhwanazi is now probably the most popular quasi-political figure in the country. And that's also something we have to bear in mind. It doesn't speak to whether we should trust his testimony or not. We still have to weigh that up. But it does also mean that he also stands to gain quite a lot from this process, potentially. He's definitely burnishing his personal platform. We have no indication that he has any particular, political aims. But as Johnny Steinberg wrote very powerfully in News 24, just after Mkhwanazi had that press conference, we should not be thrilled by the sight of a man in army fatigues, surrounded by people wearing balaclavas, kind of commandeering the national broadcasters to give an address. Because there are plenty of countries where that really does not end well. The kind of theater of coup, I think, was a little bit frightening, to be honest with you. And I agree with my colleague Ferial that what has been nice is that the commission has been so demilitarized. He's not even in a police outfit, he's in a suit. And I think that's as it should be, because the specter of a coup, when it comes to people in the military, top cops, etc., is I mean, I think it should frighten us all. There's no indication that that is what is going here, just to say. But to people who say, oh, the media shouldn't be so skeptical about his claims, we have to be. We have to be because we haven't seen any evidence. It's the same as reporting a court case or any other commission. You report what is said, fine, but you also are trying to some degree, fact check along the way to give your audience a sense of whether they should believe it or not. And at the moment, we just really don't know.
I just want to get back to Senzo Mkhunu. One of the things that I woke up thinking about was all these allegations around him. Are they literally all around the time that he became a police minister? He's only been a police minister for just 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Last year. So if all of this unfolded in a space of a year and a couple of, it just left me in a state of paralysis. And again, I confess, I disengaged because it was so traumatic. All these allegations, all this focus on this when we should be building our country. Let's just talk about Mkhunu for just a minute as a police commissioner who is a police minister who comes from KZN himself. And Mkhwanazi, if I recall, he also was an acting police commissioner and was tipped to take over. But then during the Zuma presidency, he wasn't appointed. So why would the MKP be embracing him? Why would he be popular with him, if at all he is?
That's a good question. I don't know about the history there in terms of his potential succession to the top. But it is very clear that he has kind of personal career spats with other top cops, that there's like a kind of competitiveness or something going on between him and Shadrack Seboa, that they were perhaps in contention for certain roles together. So I think there's definitely an element of it that is probably professional rivalry. When it comes to Senzo, I'll tell you a little anecdote about Senzo. So a few months ago, I was struck by the fact that
Answer the phone, Rebecca.
It's Senzo. She's telling me not to talk badly again. A few months ago, I was struck by the fact that on Twitter there was this sustained volume of tweets in favor of Senzo Mkhunu, right? Out of the blue. Senzo Mkhunu is the best. SAPS is really inspiring confidence. Senzo Mkhunu this. Now, you know as well as I do, Redi, that for South Africans to express compliments basically about any politician, any public servant, something's up, right? That ain't real. There's just like no way.
It's so mediocre.
Everyone wakes up in the morning and is like, oh, today I must express my gratitude towards the police in South Africa. I'm sorry, I didn't buy it.
Oh.
So I started looking into it and found evidence that it was a paid-for campaign, right? And it was in the same month that there were 4 other paid-for campaigns running on Twitter. And it seemed possible that it was a paid-for campaign that was designed to pre-launch a potential ANC presidential bid by Mkhunu, because it had been sort of on the cards. People had been gossiping about it for some time. So I emailed his spokesperson and I said, as one does, for comment, and I said, look, there's this campaign that's running on Twitter and it's clearly being paid for. Are you guys behind it? Do you know who's behind it, etc.? And she responded almost immediately and said, the minister is about to call you, which again, really, you know, is extremely unusual, at least for the likes of me, because normally they're more than happy to fob it off on their spokespeople. It's different for you broadcast folk. You get premium.
Yeah, no, they call us and they yell. I once sat in a parking lot with a certain minister just yelling, and I timed it 27 minutes, and then I said thank you and moved on.
Good
but
Lord.
anyway.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Senzo phones me, and he is like a bit of a grumpy old man, but he was like, what's this about? And I was like, there's this campaign on Twitter. And as I was explaining it to him, I just realized it was hopeless, because it was like talking to my parents. As in, he was so tech unsavvy. He just did not understand a single thing I was saying. He was like, Twitter paid. It's like, they definitely. I mean, I have pretty good journalistic instincts. Did not have a clue about what was being done, even if it was ostensibly on his behest. But what did strike me about that was that, first of all, he's clearly concerned about the perceptions because he took instant action. But secondly, I thought he was unusually responsive. And I agree, it is a low bar, the really low bar. But considering the amount of times we send requests for comment to government departments and get nothing back, That in itself was enough to turn me into a tiny bit of a Senzo Mkhunu fan, to be honest. So the point is, as I said, there honestly has not been any dirt on this guy. He has had, and this is the only other person I can think of that this applies to who has been, in cabinet politics for a while is maybe someone like Naledi Pandor, who also there was not a hint of impropriety around her, I don't think, ever. It's really rare, and that was Senzo Mkhunu. So of all the figures you could have fingered to me and said that this man would be caught up in the greatest political scandal of 2025, I really would have been extremely taken aback to hear that.
Okay, let's move away from the personalities for just a moment, because that's another thing, right? Sometimes stuff falls through the cracks and you can't keep up with what exactly is being investigated. Because if the dockets or the reports on political killings were removed and taken to where they were not supposed to be taken, that's a separate matter. But the motives for that then builds another matter. And then you get these criminal elements, drug lords, hitmen, and all of that, and they fit into all of that. It's just all layer upon layer. And I imagine that the commission then must just unweave all of this and make sense for us. So perhaps you could just spend a little time just telling us, what is this commission about? What is it supposed to find out? I don't know. Good luck if you can. If you can't find
incredibly broad terms of reference, understandably, because they don't really know what they don't know. These are unknown unknowns. So they have to set the terms of reference wide enough to capture every potential element, which means that they've said they will probe SAPS, crime intelligence, like about 5 different institutions, and all members of the executive responsible for law enforcement, and that it will do all this within 6 months. For an interim report in 3 months, right? Now, we've only had, 4 or 5 days of testimony, and it has already been so overwhelming that the task that is in front of this commission seems ungodly, to be honest. But so what is happening at the moment is that they are being taken through, basically, it seems, the police testimony, right? So they've had... They had Mkhwanazi, now they've got the National Commissioner, Masemola, on the stand. And I was chatting to Mary de Haas this morning, who's a veteran KZN violence monitor. She called for the task team to be disbanded. And I was asking if she was going to testify, and she said she will if she's called, but as she understands it, they're dealing with these police claims first in the preliminary part of the commission, and only then will they move specifically to the task team. So right now it's about, these big cops ventilating whatever they want to ventilate, and then they will sort of drill down onto the issue of the task team. Now, this thing about the terms of reference being so wide is interesting, because as a legal expert told me yesterday, the phrasing around the responsibility by the executive for law enforcement is actually so broad, so vague, that it could end up targeting Cyril Ramaphosa. And so the terms of reference says it will probe the role of any member of the national executive responsible for the criminal justice system and whether they're guilty of anything by action or via omission. So because the buck sort of stops with Cyril Ramaphosa, ultimately, because he has overall within the executive, the commission could come down hard on him. They could say, well, you knew it happening and you did nothing to help it. We heard today, in fact, there was some testimony that Masemola went to Ramaphosa about the task team, and clearly there was no action taken. So the big man himself could end up in the firing line, which is also something to keep in mind in terms of the political implications. So it's a mammoth task. I don't know exactly how many people they have working for them, but they have investigators, obviously. Mary de Haas said she was sending them material as well. And it will be the unenviable task of Judge Madlanga and his co-assessors to comb through all the evidence. They can recommend criminal prosecutions immediately. And then we wait and see if anything happens. As you said, unfortunately, Zondo was not exactly followed by the flurry of arrests that many of us hoped.
And just before we conclude, it's exactly that the nation just sits and watches this horror unfold. And even if the responsible thing to say is these are allegations, accusations, they need to be tested and so on. Our experience tells us that our recent experience with the Zondo Commission, that at the conclusion of it, the accountability is nowhere near what we ask for. I wouldn't go as far as saying nothing has happened, but nothing that satisfies, nothing that restores our confidence in the criminal justice system, in law enforcement itself. What are your thoughts around how the public should engage with the commission itself the responsible thing to do, as it were. Mine is how the media reports on this. I've seen that in the aftermath of someone's name being dropped, they are on TV, on radio, denying that they did that. Fine, but they're not doing so at the commission. They're doing so on a media platform. And then they are gifted with a very nice, generous headline, so-and-so has refuted. Of course, refute and deny are two different things. To refute, you must provide evidence and you must be proven to be right. Or things like he has clarified. Nobody has clarity at this point, except the perpetrators of whatever it is that they did.
So a few things, really. I wrote this somewhere the other day, but one of the problems is that South Africa is a very conspiratorial country. I read a report recently that suggested that we are one of the countries on earth that has the greatest belief in conspiracy theories, right? I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why that would be. Maybe it's connected to, I don't know, beliefs about witchcraft or merely a sense that, our lives are at the mercy of shadowy forces that we don't quite understand. But that's who we are as a people. And what concerns me is that what the Madlanga Commission is hearing up now is effectively this vast conspiracy theory, right? It takes in, cabinet ministers and MPs and police top brass, all the elites that if you are a conspiratorially minded person, you already think are out to get you. And now you're being served up this luscious conspiracy picnic and being told to feast. And you're like, I knew it. I knew the cops were shady. I knew the politicians were all in cahoots, etc. So that's something to take into account, right? That there are, and I've noticed that the public interest in this is very high, like higher than I would have expected for what could be a kind of arcane inquiry about policing matters. People are following this closely, and I think it is partly because they want their worst fears kind of corroborated, the fears about corruption, the police fear the highest levels of criminal infiltration into our politics. So we must try and, it's our job, I think, as journalists and media practitioners to try and sort of pump the brakes on this stuff as much as possible while giving it a fair hearing, while obviously covering it as robustly as we can. But I think what you said there is the most important, that even if it turns out that these claims by Mkhwanazi are baseless, or in some way that he is presenting them, or he is perhaps misinformed, whatever, even if it turns out that Senzo Mchunu did not do this for any nefarious reasons, the point is the impression that we are still left with as the public is of a police service in complete dysfunction, right? At the very top. That we have a police force that's basically divided against itself between Seboa and Masemola and Mkhwanazi, that there's clearly all this infighting, that there definitely is criminal infiltration, and that this fight is happening in such public view will do nothing, as you say, for public trust in the police, will do nothing for public trust in the authorities more widely. And that's an issue too. There's going to be mud thrown at judges, for instance. One of the terms of reference is that they can also look into any judicial players that may have been part of this alleged syndicate. That has really frightening implications for me, because if we start questioning the integrity of judges, that to me is a really slippery slope. So none of this is good, really. None of this is good. But maybe it's good that it's being at least probed, that it is being taken seriously, and that it is happening, most of it, some of it will be in camera, but most of it is happening where we can see it and keep an eye on it.
I'm just glad I don't have to report on this on a day-to-day basis as a reporter, because I wouldn't say I'm not objective, but I'm affected in a particular way, and that is trauma, the historic layers and so on. And I'm also impressed by Mkhwanazi's commitment and his confidence, his memory and so on. But I also know that the responsible thing to do is indeed to listen and then deal with the evidence dispassionately. That's the best way that this commission can acquit itself. We have to stop there, but I want you to publicly commit to being available one day when there are more bombshells and there's more reaction, and I need someone to educate me about this commission. I want a public commitment.
You got it, Redi, anytime.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and thank you everybody for watching the Readiness Report with the Daily Maverick. I love being with you. Take care of yourselves. Don't listen to fake news. Don't forward fake news. Don't get hysterical. Focus. Focus. Bye-bye.